Welcome, everyone. I'm here with Savannah, Dr. Encore, Chrissy, Esther, and Amelia. Today, we are going to talk about when you are executing your intentions, your communications or your actions, and with your good intentions. How do you know the person in front of you or the team in front of you is receiving it the way you intended it, right? And so I'll start by saying we are learning all the time from people and from situations on how to action in the world and how to communicate. But we need a mechanism for when you go and talk to that other person or action in that new company or environment or team or country or culture or whatever. We need a way of saying, I'm saying this word or I'm doing this action. What is my grading metric on the other side? And that is ultimately what my answer is. My answer is on how to make sure that you are executing your intentions properly is what is the WebTM spectrum I'm expecting? What am I expecting in terms of words, eye movement, body language, tone, voice, microexpressions, right? Because if I just say it out and I'm like, oh, well, investors usually like this, or founders usually like this, or this human or this girl or this guy usually likes this, right? If I just execute it and not check the KPI on the output on their whole WebTM or what I would expect them to action on next, then we're not checking that. And so that's as simple as I'll say it. And it's very simple, but it's very, very powerful. And that is the way that I do it. So that is my high level.
Next. The way that I understand communication and the way that I've filtered it through my life is usually I communicate to be understood rather than to put my voice out there, right? And so I'll word it into a way that the person will understand its meaning rather than my external view of the world and saying it that way. So if I'm talking to an engineer, I'm going to talk to them differently. The same concept will be explained differently than if I'm talking to a friend that is like a childhood friend, right? Because we have maybe the engineer will prefer more logical perspective of whatever it is I'm talking about to like pull the concept all the way into existence, rather than my childhood friend would probably prefer just like a simplified version or like a build up from bottom up in the way that they're used to thinking. And it depends on how well you know the person, obviously, but you can kind of gather from their experience of what you do know from them, what way they prefer, and through their eye movements and body language, whether they actually are understanding what you're trying to get through.
I like that. Well, I'll jump in here. Just to build on that, I think a lot of it comes down to how well do you know them and what's the leeway you're giving them as you start to know them or get to know them. Because you can have, the easiest thing people say is, well, repeat it back after I tell you, and that should pretty much tell me that you understood everything. No, I just know how to memorize what you said and I just said it back to you. So I think it's really about, okay, this is what I'm trying to say. Let me be flexible in what I'm saying because oftentimes we think we're super clear in what we're saying and we're not, right? And that changes from person to person. So I think deliver the message, but then be open to how do you get there, involve them in the process, and then obviously have the frequent follow-up. So you're not just leaving them hanging in the wind, and then 6 weeks, there's your deadline. You're like, this is not what I wanted. You're to blame. So a lot of follow-ups and getting to know them. And then once you have that kind of gelling, then you're kind of more confident in where you're going to go beyond that.
Yeah.
I'd like to jump in,
Yeah. Go
to
ahead.
follow up on that actually. So that's a really good point. And I think the engagement is really important for me. So I try to bring the person into the conversation as much as possible. So instead of a repeat of what I just said, I'll say, well, what's your thought on that? Or what's your perspective on that? And engage them in a more meaningful conversation around what I'm trying to get across so that I can then see how do they perceive it, and it's like a safer space for them to bring me that feedback, right? And that I think that's really important.
Yeah, I was gonna sort of second that. I love that point. I think to what you said, engaging them and maybe even going a step further than was what we probably all see a lot, which is like, does that make sense? I think, it's really, people are just naturally going to respond yes, even if it doesn't. But sort of reframing that question to, like, how are you interpreting that? Or like, Chrissy, like you said, what are your thoughts about that? And then even maybe again, going a step further is to, why do you think I'm asking this? And not in a judging or attacking way, but seeing if you can help pull out from them their understanding. Because at the end of the day, when it's a project or some sort of ask, I always like to encourage people to ask the why, because that sort of helps you better understand what aspect of it fundamentally they're understanding, and are they getting not just like what it is itself, but the reasons why. I think that shows whether they actually are clearly following along. And so having them sort of reiterate why they think this would be important, or why I'm asking them to do this, will also sort of confirm and help engage to make sure everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I wanted to share is something that I do frequently. is I frame the conversation in a way that I have my person that I'm talking to talk first, because then I can tailor like everything that I share about myself. Say this is an intro call, everything that I share about myself can be tailored to them and like what they care about, what they want to talk about the most. Because at the end of the day, communication is always supposed to be caring. Like through every intro call that I do, through every call that I have with a client, I want to make sure that our time is used most effectively, most efficiently. And the best way to do that is to have them go through exactly what they want to talk about first, all of their background, all their experiences, and then I tailor my conversation and speech towards that so that it's beneficial for everyone. So just
I love it. Yeah, I think at a high level, to remember that the way our brain stores words is sound waves are coming through a chain of bones in our ears and being merged with what we're smelling at the time, what we're tasting at the time, what we're feeling at the time, and it's all stored in neuron clusters. And that's how we store the word potato or guy or girl or etc. Right? And so to understand that, and then to layer two, when we're looking at somebody, looking and saying, there's an alignment of words and even micro expressions that needs to happen here. And so what is that gap that we're closing? And that's what happens when we start to, like, kind of like Dr. Ankur was saying, like getting to know somebody over time, right? You're going to start to close that gap. And as like Savannah's talking about, like where we, her and I will end up getting on a lot of calls all the time, and we want people to talk first. Same with Esther, right? We'll want people to talk first, because then we're not just like letting them talk first and understanding them. We're also understanding how do they use words. When you see somebody pattern this word frequency, and their micro expressions and their tone of voice is going with those words, we're starting to understand more of how they are using those words. And then when we use their words back, that is essentially a way of getting to alignment sooner inside of a single call, instead of necessarily maybe over 5 or 6 calls, is because we're getting that word alignment sooner. So they can either align to yours, you can align to theirs, or whatever, but or it's a mixture of the two. But like when we start to hire a new employee, when we start a new relationship with somebody, we want to think over hours, days, weeks, months, etc., how we're kind of closing the gap of alignment of words and how we're kind of using those mechanisms. Thank you guys for chatting today.